Oh, hello there. Yeah, well, 'tis warm, innit? Yeah, still, whatever the government does, it mustn't warn us to stay indoors. That would be silly. I mean, it just ends up killing people. And there's too many of them, isn't there? Too many people here. Too many of them. They all need to go home, wherever that is. Anyway, yesterday there was another one of those kind of trying to grab the headlines and not really managing it events, dear boy, events from the Reform Party. This one was, what was it, Women for Reform, yeah, four of them they managed to scrape up, and it was about protecting women and girls, yes. Press conference labelled as, and well, I imagine you didn't watch it. It's probably quite wise. I did, actually, but well, the first thing that really struck me about it was, first of all, isn't a press conference supposed to be somewhere where the press asks you some questions? Because after standing on a stage with, I don't know, some photographers in the audience, as far as I can make out, they then decided to, oh dear God, have Sarah Puccin have a bit of a chat along with the others with Dr. David Bull. Which isn't really much of a press conference. And if you look at the reporting of it, I think it was only basically the Tory Graph that picked it up. They reported it, obviously from somebody that had watched the live stream. So they weren't there. Anyway, yeah, protecting women and girls. Now, I'm somebody that came of age during the 1980s, sort of, third wave feminism. Yeah, we're going with the British waves of feminism. We're not going to go those American ones, okay? And as such, was sort of reasonably familiar with, well, that thing we call feminism, both from liberal all the way through to, well, Andrea Dworkin's, let's face it. Yes. Also did my degree in a fair chunk of the degree that I did was about women and, well, sexism and feminism and politics, and a bit of Foucault thrown in and all that kind of stuff, because hey, it was the 1980s, and if you wanted to be a hip happening kid you had to read Foucault. Don't, by the way. Anyway, I reasonably au fait with the notion of feminism, and well, the Reform Party don't appear to be, put it that way. Basically the entire press conference, cough cough, was telling us that brown people are bad. Went as far as that. I would have thought that, people that are concerned about women and girls would take a more kind of feminist and holistic approach to it. Maybe a Marxist feminist position, which would tend to account for the economy. But there wasn't quite any of that on display. Anyway, as I say, there's a link down below, and you can watch that if you've really got nothing else to do. And by nothing else I mean literally nothing else to do. Anyway, yeah, leaving that aside, it got me thinking about the notion of right-wing women and feminism, because very often the type of people in the media that present themselves as feminists tend to be your sort of Julia Hartley-Brewer type, who just seem to work on the basis that because they have fallopian tubes, that's not hard, is it? Yeah, it's for me. Anyway, yeah, just simply on that basis that they therefore are inherently feminists, because we got the vote somehow or other a long time ago, and we, for reasons we won't go into because it does raise bad parallels with today. But anyway, women were granted the vote, rightly so, because that's the way that capitalism works. It just loves giving people rights after a short discussion. Anyway, yeah, leaving that aside. Yeah, and therefore everything is done and dusted, and we don't need to do anything more about it until various things rear their ugly head, very often in and around economics and the role of women in society, and very often in sexual violence. Oh my God, oh no, we're going to bring that one up. Oh yes. But it often does, and then people have to kind of squirm around and try to invent reasons why, once again, nothing should really be done about it. And yeah, Daily Telegraph, I do love this, right? Okay, I thought wasn't really doing Sarah Puccin any favours. I mean, Sarah Puccin doesn't do Sarah Puccin any favours, but this headline, Trump is a bit of a chauvinist, says Reform's first female MP. Sarah Puccin reckons the US president clearly respects women, but can appear prejudiced at times. Yes, which is one of those brilliant ways of mincing your words, because, of course, he doesn't, does he? In any way, shape or form. And I think any self-respecting woman wouldn't possibly go there. But of course this is politics, and in politics it doesn't really matter that that you know full well that certain things are true because you cannot admit it, which is Sarah Pacin's stock in trade. But I thought I'd look at some of the women and their voting record who are very, very concerned about, women and girls, because Sarah Pacin hasn't been an MP for long, so doesn't have much of a voting record. But if you look at her written questions, link down below, you can see that she's asked an awful lot of questions about why it is there's so many asylum seekers in the UK. Yes, those are basically all of her written questions. Which isn't really a huge feminist issue, I'm sorry to say, because, again, that thing, my understanding of certainly most mainstream sort of Marxist feminism, as it was during the 80s, in the sense of anything that was happening on a vaguely academic sort of social policy level, was that, we wouldn't sort of see race as an entirely separate issue in and around feminism. It was more of a sort of continuum. It was those kind of days towards the late 1980s when we were reaching for intersectionality. Yeah, you see, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, you can argue it went too far. Oh my God, it's political correctness as it was in those days. It went too far, and in many ways it did in terms of personal politics. But you've got to buy into intersectionality, I'm afraid, because it's just really, really sensible. It's the way things are, isn't it? Yeah. Kemi Badenoch may well be black and Nigerian, in inverted commas, depending on how on earth she's seeing herself these days. But once you factor class and everything else into it, other things get to be important, don't they? That's the nature of the game. That's the nature of feminism, which, of course, Sarah Pacin and the rest of them have no idea about, other than on a vaguely political level. Yes. And, of course, then there's Dame, nothing like a Dame Andrea Jenkins, who, again, looked at her voting record, and, I can't really see anything specific that she did in and around women. Now, you might argue that she doesn't have to, because after all, women got the vote. Yeah, okay. But isn't it just a bit convenient that these people suddenly decide or suddenly realise that they live in a bit of a sexist world, but they live in a sexist world that realistically is only partially sexist, and only certain things are problems at certain times from certain groups of men? Not really a very feminist position, is it? I mean, but this is your Reform Party to a T. I mean, we've been hearing a lot about their savings for the last few days, about all the great savings that they've been making. And it got me thinking about what a perfect metaphor for their savings are, because if you give me 10 quid to go to the shops and I come back with, I don't know, the milk and butter you wanted, let's say, and I've got 3 quid change, I haven't saved you 3 quid, have I? I simply haven't spent 3 quid. But lots and lots of what the Reform is arguing in terms of its savings, particularly, oh dear God, thank God, net zero stuff, is just that they've decided not to spend any money on something, which isn't necessarily a saving. Is it? No, it isn't, is it? Right? In one of their councils, they've decided not to insulate some of the homes that they own, which is a saving. But then you end up with uninsulated homes, don't you? It's not really a saving, is it? Still, never mind. There's the direction of travel for you, okay? If you are a woman, you can just lump it with the economic system in a very, very cold house. And, if you are a brown person, then we'll hint greatly that we're going to deport you, but actually won't, even though we're terrified of the people that are yapping at our heels. Some of them ex-members of Reform. Those MPs we can't possibly say anything about, because when we were working alongside them, we had to kind of ignore that they were a little bit chauvinist. Does anybody actually use that word these days? There are much, much better words, Sarah. Yeah? I mean, I know people apply various words to you, but, please don't use words like chauvinist. It dresses up something from, for example, a US president who is currently trying desperately to hide some of his other sexual misdemeanors. Anyway, do have a glorious day. Do stay cool if you can do, because these kind of things are important, because heat kills people. I know, lots and lots of feminists in the media don't really want to accept that, but that's because they themselves aren't necessarily affected by very, very hot buildings. It tends to be people, in that intersectional way, who are people of colour, who are poor at the bottom end of the scale. But, that's just, feminism. Do have a lovely one, if you can.